I'm Stephen Foskett, the organizer of Tech Field Day, and you're about to see a presentation and discussion with Docker. Around the table, we have a dozen and more independent experts in enterprise IT, and they are here to listen, to discuss, and to interact during the presentation. If you'd like to learn more about this event, you can go to techfieldday.com, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can go to youtube.com/techfieldday.
Hello. My name is Michael Friis. I'm a product manager at Docker. I work on a bunch of different things at Docker. One of them is all the things we do with Microsoft, but I also work actually with Madhu sitting over here on what we call Docker for AWS and Azure that I'll talk about in detail and demo. Docker for AWS and Azure came about because we kind of realized that it takes a lot of infrastructure for people to set up and run a container platform, including in the cloud. Like you have to figure out what Linux you want to run. You have to figure out how that particular infrastructure works and how Docker works and how to best blend those two, so that you can run a good and secure container platform. So with Docker for AWS and Azure, we wanted to make that simpler. And we kind of built on the experiences with Docker for Mac and Windows. So how many here? So if you're using Docker, are you using Docker for Mac and Windows? Cool, quite a few. Yeah, so with Docker for Mac and Windows, right, we wanted the developer products, and we wanted to make it incredibly quick and simple to get set up to develop Docker apps on either Mac or Windows. And we built them to take maximum advantage of Windows or Mac. Or OS X, sorry, so that they're like just a really great experience and fast and well integrated. So Docker for Mac and Windows are incredibly popular, and we wanted to then try to do something similar for AWS and Azure. Instead of building a developer product, we wanted to build something for ops people that want to run Docker apps. So provide a really quick and simple way to set up Docker on AWS and Azure. So I'll go into way more detail in the demo, but the components are basically like a system for setup and bootstrap, and so we rely on CloudFormation on AWS, EC2 CloudFormation, and on Azure we rely on Azure Resource Manager templates to bootstrap a Swarm cluster on AWS. Then those templates take care of all the kind of cluster configuration, doing Swarm init, setting up Swarm, and configuring a secure network setup. We rely on, for access management, we rely on SSH and kind of the whatever, or the PKI that comes with EC2. Then we also do load balancer integration, so that if you want to deploy websites on your AWS and Azure cluster, we make it super simple and open up ports right off the bat. Both AWS and Azure ship with custom minimal Linux that we maintain. So if you looked under the covers of Docker for Mac and Windows, you'll know that there's a small VM running, and that's actually the same Linux distribution that we've reused for AWS and Azure. And then the final thing that we do so far that's really complicated is managing upgrades. So Docker is a fast-moving project, and we ship new versions frequently, and we wanted to make the process of upgrading your installation on Docker for AWS and Azure super smooth. So both of those ship with a bunch of infrastructure to seamlessly do rolling upgrades of Docker and the underlying Linux itself. Yeah, I'll just demo this. So Docker for AWS and Azure are still in beta. So if you want to try it, go to beta.docker.com and sign up. But we're actually I can divulge now that we'll be making these public very soon. So you can also just hang back and wait for that. But anyhow, what happens once you get into the beta is that we send you an email, and it basically has, for AWS, it has a kind of CloudFormation launch stack button, and similar for Azure. So I'm just going to copy this link. So you click this link, and then you get taken through the standard AWS CloudFormation setup. So if you're familiar with AWS, you've probably seen this before. So you're asked to specify, give a name and say how many manager and worker nodes you want and what sizes they're supposed to be, and then I have to choose a key to use for access. I have to click through a couple other screens, and then when I click create here, AWS basically goes and instantiates that CloudFormation template and sets up a Docker Swarm. It takes a few minutes, so I already pre-created one over here. So I got this one here. So you get, there's two outputs that you get once the swarm is set up. And one of them is the manager node IPs. So the way you kind of access and administer your new swarm is just by SSHing into a manager node. So I'll do that right now. Oh, it's pretty small. Pardon?
While you're doing that, I mean, how would you see the differentiators between running this versus, say, Amazon EC2?
Yeah, so ECS, like they built that really early on, and it's a great product. But kind of looking at it from Docker side, one of the frustrations with ECS is that for us, like it's when we release new versions of Docker, there's often a lag before people have access to the newest version of Docker and ECS, and also they kind of wrap some of Docker functionalities, and other functionality of Docker they don't even expose. So and it makes sense what they've done, especially because Docker was missing some features back when they built it. But now now kind of looking at ECS, it's just not a complete Docker platform. It's not a standard Docker platform. It's just it's a product that wraps parts of what Docker is. So with Docker for AWS, we just wanted to build like our vision of how Docker should run on EC2 and provide a standard platform and a standard installer of Docker that people can use. And then the other important component is that we try to build this neat upgrade experience so that it's easy for people to upgrade, and you can always stay on the latest version of Docker and get the latest and greatest. Okay, so I SSH into my manager node, and I can now do all the standard Docker management commands. So I can do Docker node ls to see the nodes that are in my swarm, and I can do Docker ps. You can see for Docker ps, you can actually see some of the kind of service controllers that we run on the swarm to manage it. And I can also start deploying apps right away. So I can do Docker service create. I can name it Nginx, expose a port, and run the Nginx container. So I now have a Nginx service running on this swarm, and then the other output I got is we create a EC2 ELB. So I should now be able to I can access my Nginx sample site running on that ELB, and it's as quick as that. And the way that happened was that you can see here, these are all the resources that were created when Docker installed on AWS. So there's a bunch of networking stuff, the scaling groups for the manager and worker nodes, and then the ELBs. So we can go take a closer look at the ELB. And look at the listeners, and you can see Docker auto-created auto-added a listener on port 80 so that the Nginx service I just created is immediately available on the load balancer. So that was done by one of the service containers that we run on top of the Swarm. Second, let's get rid of that again. Yeah, just to show you a more complicated example, I'm going to deploy, so one of the things we launched DockerCon also along with this was what's called DAB files, which are which is a way to kind of deploy multi-service or multi-container apps on a Swarm. So I'm just going to find that guy. So this is an example Docker voting app, which is a kind of overcomplicated microservices app with 5 different services just for running a website. Yeah, I can open the compose file. So this is a compose file. You can see there are 5 different services, including 2 web front ends, a database, a worker, and then a queue powered by Redis. I already created a DAB file, so I can now deploy that to my Swarm on AWS. So I'll do docker deploy IV. So that it read that DAB file and created both the networks and the services required to run this app. And you can see it's still booting. Hopefully it'll get up soon. There we go. And then I'll just publish some ports to make it available. And I should now be able to visit my site. If everything is going all right. Yeah, here we go. Anyway, one of the web front ends are working, and see about the other one. Oh, there we go. So that's a voting app, right? So if you could read super quickly and type even faster, you could go to this DNS name and start voting for cats or dogs, it's working with the queue, the database, all the rest of it. So kind of the net of this demo is that in a couple of minutes, I set up a fully functioning Docker Swarm on AWS. It's secure. It's very easy to use because we integrate with AWS to make deploying apps super simple. You don't have to do anything really. You have to click through the AWS interface, and then you can start using Docker right away. You don't have to understand and deal with all the details of using AWS and figuring out how to configure load balancers and how to do a secure Docker deployment on AWS. We take care of that for you. And 2 months down the road, when you need to upgrade, we also handle that for you. And then I took a complicated app and deployed it on that Swarm on AWS, and it's now available on the public internet.
Can you go back to the DAB file you were just showing us in code?
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. Let's see. So the way DAB files work is we're actually going to change this with Docker 113.
You're answering my question right now.
Yeah. So for a long time we had Docker Compose, which is a great development tool for developing multi-container apps. Then with the launch of Swarm, we changed the Docker Compose is based on the kind of old Docker engine imperative model, like start this container, start that container, create a network that links them. Swarm is more declarative. It's like you specify I want to create this set of services and maintain that state going forward. So when we introduced Swarm, we also introduced a file format that was similarly declarative. And the way it worked was that you could take a compose file and create a DAB file. similar to how you take a Docker file and create a Docker image. So the dab file is kind of a declarative deployment artifact that you can use to instantiate a set of services. So this is the actual dab file. It's JSON based and it's just kind of a representation of the Docker file with referencing images, networks, and port mappings.
The compose file is more like a run book as opposed
well,
to...
so actually what's happening is if you're following along for Docker 1.13, you'll note that recently some PRs went in where we are adding compose support for services. So basically, you don't have to do this roundabout thing where you have a compose file, then you create a dab file that you then deploy. You can take a compose file and immediately instantiate it on a running swarm so that services are created. So this will change a little bit, but right now the process is that you do you basically do so Docker Compose has a command called bundle. So you run Docker Compose bundle, and what that does is it reads a compose file, creates a dab file, and then you can go deploy the dab file.
But a dab file is only for 1.13 and higher?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, so I think the best thing to say here is just stay tuned. This is going to clear up very soon. Did that make sense a little bit?
Well, it did until you said that if I understood you correctly, we will be able to just use the Docker Compose file. So the dab file
the main message is don't worry too much about dab. Compose is going to be great.
Kind of an intermediate thing, and we'll forget about that thing in a little bit.
No, I think we'll keep it around. It might be useful to some people, but we also realized that people really like Compose, and they spent a ton of time building great Compose files. So we wanted to support that more natively.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And so we're already familiar with that. Got a bunch built using that, and so we'll just keep using that.
And it's going to play nicely with services and all the new constructs that showed up with Docker 1.12.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, I think that was all I had. Yeah, if you want to, I said that already. If you want to try it out, go to beta.docker.com. The docs are also there. If you really want to get into the beta before we make it public, feel free to shoot me a note on Twitter. Thanks.